From beautiful downtown Millheim, in the smack dab center of the Keystone State, once again, at long last, this is Lou Bryson with Seen Through a Glass, the podcast that's mostly about food and drink in central Pennsylvania. Welcome to episode 46, Whiskey Business. Yep, I'm finally back. That was a long, unplanned hiatus there, and I apologize. I should have at least posted a short announcement episode. I did put up a note on the podcast Facebook page, which reminds me that I still need to create a website. I told you I was finishing the manuscript for my next book, American Whiskey Masterclass, but that's not the whole story. So here's why I didn't do any new episodes of Seen Through a Glass from early October through, well, now. Finishing the book was just the start of it. The best description I've ever heard about what it's like when you're writing to a book deadline is from Brooklyn Brewery's Garrett Oliver, who said that writing his classic beer and food pairing book, The Brewmaster's Table, was like having a term paper overdue every day for 6 months. It's intense, and you write and rewrite and go back and read it and then write some more. And every now and then you scan through the whole thing you've got done to make sure you've got everything in the right place. Because what seemed like a good idea when you wrote your outline may not have been the best way to do things. So then you may rearrange parts and have to write new paragraph and section segues to make those new connections, and maybe quickly research and write about the things you realized you missed. Like, on the last day before deadline, I realized I had written nothing about thermal coupling in warehouses, which is a real thing, and explains why warehouses in Kentucky are 9 stories high and made of wood with a thin metal sheath, instead of 3 stories high and made of brick and stone. So I wrote another 800 words on that last day when I had thought I was done. And that is why I didn't get any podcasting done through mid-November when the book was due. It's also why you're getting an episode that's largely about whiskey, because I've still got a head full of interesting whiskey stuff, so why not share it? You're getting the first of 2 interviews from a trip I took back in early October, a trip I set up last March when I thought I'd be done with the book on October 1st. But then my mother went in the hospital in mid-July, just as I was about to start the actual writing, and then died 3 short weeks later. Some of you sent very nice condolences, and I appreciate it. My mother was, of course, a lot of who I am and who I've become, and how I write and think. She means a lot to me, and I dedicated the new book to her memory. But her sudden death threw me completely off writing. I mean, who cared? I owe a debt of gratitude to my editor for the book, Jennifer Kushner, for getting me back on track with friendly encouragement. I also tip my hat to her for not losing her grip when I took 5 days off in the midst of feverishly writing to go judge the American Craft Spirits Association competition in D.C., and then drive off to judge a barrel-aged beer competition in Michigan. Because, you see, back in the spring, I'd said I would, and that matters. It was also a much-needed break. By the way, the book won't be out till the fall, so don't get too excited yet. And this is how things work in drinks publishing. It's not fast. And I bring that up because the next reason I didn't get back to the podcast was because Jennifer moved her schedule to make sure we could keep the book on time. See, I finished the book on November 14th, which was a Thursday, and thought that, as usual, I'd have at least a month before edits came back. I know I said that to several people. Oh, I've got a month. So I took a day off. I listened to music, I played with the dogs, and talked to Kathy a lot. The next day, my friend Dave Dries and I drove up into the woods north of Lock Haven to Heiner View State Park. Wow, was it ever windy and cold up there. And then we had lunch and some house beers at Good Neighbor Craft House, right across the West Branch from the View. It was their last week there before moving to Lock Haven. Yes, Lock Haven is finally getting a brewery in February. I was relaxing. But I knew I still had more work to do on the book, like coming up with what's called a shot list, all the photos I'd like to see to illustrate what I'm talking about, where they belong in the text, and some rough sketches of things that can't really be photographed and would need an illustration. Dave was actually a huge help with the rough sketches, and we talked about that at the brew pub. I also had about 30 tasting notes to write on whiskeys that illustrated what I was talking about. I had sample bottles all over and under my desk, and I had to taste and write notes of under 30 words for them, which If you've heard me wandering through what I'm drinking today, you'd know it was not going to be easy. And then the actual edits would be coming back, whatever Jennifer blue-lined in the manuscript. So I got to work on this episode after I got back from my little day trip, because, like I said, I figured I had a month and we'd have time to get the podcast back into the rotation. But Jennifer's job was to make up the 6 weeks we'd lost. And she did that by dropping everything on her schedule and editing my manuscript immediately. I started getting edits the following Tuesday, 4 chapters at a time. And I got a new deadline of December 4th to get everything, the edits, the tasting notes, the shot list, and those rough sketches into her. Okay, so the podcast got put on hold again. And then I got a really bad cold the day before Thanksgiving that rapidly got worse, and I woke up Thanksgiving morning with no voice at all. I was reduced to a painful whisper for 4 days, and only got a little better after that. I had no voice all the way through the holidays. And that's the final reason you didn't get a podcast until now. A solo podcaster who loses his voice does not have a lot of options. I couldn't even do interviews. I've been hoarse and harsh, and I only got my voice back in the past few days. It's Monday, January 6th as I write this. Tomorrow I'm driving down to King of Prussia, outside of Philly, to tape 2 episodes of What's Brewing PA, the beer show I co-host with Glenn Macnow. You should check it out on YouTube. It's a good show. I'm pleased with it. So I'm going to do those shows, drop off my son's Christmas presents, and then stop by my mom's apartment to pick up the last heirlooms we're keeping before the cleanup crew descends. And Wednesday, the 8th of January, hopefully, I'll be recording this, and you'll get it on the 9th, and we'll be back on schedule. Psst, it is the 8th. I'm recording now. It worked. Sadly, that means we had no holiday episode for 2024. We missed the 2nd anniversary of the show and hitting 20,000 total downloads, too. I'm going to have to make that up to us somehow. Maybe a big spring episode? I'll figure something out. Feel free to send suggestions. And before I forget, my apologies for the absence, and my thanks for your patience. I hope most of you have come back. I've kept thinking, and I have some show ideas I think are going to be really good. We're back. But before I get to anything else, here's what I'm drinking today. Appropriately, it's a whiskey. I got a good handful of new whiskey samples in the past few months, so I picked out a good one. New Riff and Covington, Kentucky, sent me a bottle of their new Bottled in Bond Winter Whiskey Straight Bourbon. It's a whiskey that sounds like something a craft brewer came up with, which is not surprising. Their master distiller is a former craft brewer. It's made with malted oats and roasted chocolate malts, along with corn and rye. I was excited to try this stuff, and it delivers. Come with me, let's try it. I have to be honest, I spilled a little of this before I actually started recording, and I've been smelling it the whole way, because it got on my shirt, it got some on my pants. But, it smells great. It's got a really, it smells like bourbon. But then it's got this chocolatey note that's intriguing, and a little bit of, I think I may be one of the few people who recognize this. It has a kind of buckwheat smell to it. I don't know if that's coming from the malted oats, but there's a couple of buckwheat whiskeys out there. There's not many. I think there's only 3 or 4 in the whole country. And they have a kind of autumn leaves smell to them. And this has a little bit of that. It's like a almost just gently smoky dryness to it. But there's a sweetness from the corn underneath, and that chocolatey smell. Take a sip. Oh, yeah. There it is. There's a dryness up front in this whiskey that is startling. When it first hits your mouth, it's not puckery, but it's very dry. You're like, there's no, and then the corn comes in and washes. Yeah, there it is. There's like this dryness on the front of your tongue, and then as it spreads out across the back and into your mouth, it really warms up and becomes sweet and inviting. And then there's that dry leaf thing again, and it all follows up with the chocolate. And it's not Wow, I saw somebody else review this, and they said it was like a box of chocolates, like you're getting some creams, and you're getting some caramels, and you're getting some nuts. I don't think that's a bad description. It's like a box of chocolates rather than a chocolate, because it really does, it changes it as it hits different parts of your tongue, and as you breathe differently. Yeah, and then the dryness comes back in the finish, and yet, there's a dryness in the back of your mouth, but along your teeth and in your cheeks, there's still that juicy sweetness from the corn. It's a really interesting whiskey. It is bottled in bond, no chill filtration. That's a New Riff kind of thing. I don't know if there's any of it that's still around, but just keep an eye on New Riff. They do a lot of really fun, cool stuff. And fortified by that, I now feel ready to deliver your smack dab in the center, sponsored by the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau. I know we usually talk about food and drink in this spot, but Happy Valley has a lot more to talk about, and one of those things is weirdly cool. The American Philatelic Society headquarters in Bellefonte, in the old Match Factory building. Why go visit a bunch of stamp collectors? Well, they love to share. They will literally give you stamps. They have something they call the stamp table, which is covered in stamps from all over the world. Some of them are gorgeous, little artworks of birds and fish, ships, any topic you can imagine. They even have blimps. They're all canceled, of course, which means you can't use them on your mail, but it's a great way to see what these philatelists, that's the fancy name for stamp collectors, are so excited about. And you can take some home with you. They'll give them to you to start your own collection. I've started one with airplanes, and there are some beautiful, amazing examples. They have a major research library on stamps and postal systems, of course, that is free to use and quiet with lots of natural light. There's even a large model of a Jenny aircraft, like the ones that once made Bellefonte a hub of the early airmail system, and that's featured on that most famous U.S. stamp, the inverted Jenny. The building hosts 2 exhibits on loan from the Smithsonian National Postal Museum. And they also have an exhibit on the Holocaust, as seen through stamps and postcards, that is deeply affecting. It culminates in an enclosure of 11 million stamps representing the victims of the Holocaust. The Society building also has a working post office where you can buy stamps, of course, and send packages. And if you really do want to drink, Big Spring Spirits is in the same building. Go to the happyvalley.com website and click on Historic Sites under the Explore button. You might just find a new hobby. Okay, I'm going to tell you about how this book happened and why I write whiskey books in the first place, and why some things get in the book and others don't, which people always ask me about, and what a book editor does, and something about tasting notes, too. And since a large part of writing a whiskey book eventually involves tasting whiskey at some point, this episode's interview is with my good friend Marty Duffy, who is the North American representative for the Glencairn Glass, the unique crystal nosing glass that is my preferred vessel for whiskey work. I just used one to drink the New Riff. We'll talk about why that's so, and about the small distilleries Marty visits as part of his job. Marty and I were both judges at the 7th Annual Barrel Aged Brewfest at Journeyman Distillery in Three Oaks, Michigan, which is a little town about the size of Millheim that's tucked into the far southwest corner of Michigan. I also got an interview with Journeyman co-founder Bill Welter, a great guy, a thoughtful guy, and we'll get to that either next episode or shortly thereafter. But first, let's talk about the new book, which is going to be called American Whiskey Masterclass. The publisher, Quarto, wanted to do a luxury book, more illustrations, larger format, and focused on American whiskey. They made a proposal to my agent and I thought about what I'd like to revise and add to my previous book, Whiskey Masterclass. Well, obviously, almost everything that's not about American whiskey would have to go, but I'd also have the opportunity to expand talking about things like craft distillers, American single malts, whiskeys made directly from beers, and all the weird little corners of the whiskey regulations that I just didn't have room for in that first book. I ran up an outline, they gave us the green light, and I started thinking. Which leads me to, why do I write these books? Well, it's not to make a lot of money, I'll tell you that. When you buy a copy of one of my books online or in an independent bookstore, I get about 85 cents. Whee! But it's also to improve my brand, which I know sounds silly, but it means I can make some money doing appearances and talks. But honestly, the main reason I do it is because I want to share this information, because I want people to enjoy whiskey more. I mean, it's not like I'm making a lot on this podcast either, but I like doing it. So how to decide what goes in and what doesn't? Well, the publisher gives me a word count for the book. This one was 80,000 words, and I turned in 80,400, which made Jennifer happy. That puts some limits on what goes in, though, but by cutting back the scope from all the world's whiskey to only American, gave me a lot of room to work with. Now, just to be clear, American Whiskey Masterclass, like my other two whiskey books, is not another ratings book. It doesn't have tasting notes from hundreds of whiskey or ratings of hundreds of distilleries. There are no recipes for food or cocktails, and no breathless talk of how to make money investing in whiskey. The book is about one thing: how the aromas and flavors of American whiskeys are created. The illustrations are there to help explain that, the tasting notes are there to help explain that, and I've done my best to create a narrative that helps explain that. So those tasting notes, how do they happen? These notes are all very directed and to the point and very much open label. I know what the whiskeys are, I selected them for specific reasons, and to be frank, if when I was tasting a whiskey, it turned out not to illustrate the point I was trying to make, if it was lacking in that character, I found another that did. And that's the tasting note you got. Now, I ramble a lot more when I do tasting notes in the podcast. And on the videos I did during the pandemic and plan to get back to doing, and that's an option. I feel like tasting notes should have a purpose, not just trying to use as many words and flavors as possible. I try to think before blurting something out. Is that what I'm tasting? Or is it moving to something else? And how's that moving and where's that going? Finally, what does a book editor do? Well, I've written for 30 years, but I was an editor for 20 years as well. The editor's job has several angles. First, the editor has to make the work fit in the space, which sometimes means cutting. A good editor only cuts fat, leaving muscular words behind. Then the editor has to make sure the work is factually correct. In fiction, that would mean ensuring consistency, and is done with proper spelling and grammar. Finally, the work should be compelling for the reader. There's no point in writing something if no one's going to be interested. But the editor also has to work with the writer, encouraging them, correcting them, guiding them. A good editor is a partner who makes suggestions, asks questions, and then steps out of the way and lets the writer run. That's the editor I had this time, and it was great. But a writer also needs sources and inspiration, which is why you're getting an interview with Marty Duffy. I thought you should know why I use the Glencairn Glass for tasting whiskey. I have for over 20 years, and how to get the most out of it. And Marty's a great storyteller. As we talk about in the second half of the interview, he also visits over 50 craft distilleries a year, so he has his finger on the pulse of the industry more than most folks. I've been to distilleries with Marty. He seems to play tourist more than he sells glasses, although I think that's just his style, because almost everywhere he goes, Glencairns pop up in distillery shops. So let's find out what makes this bulbous little handful so popular. I mean the glass, of course. Hey, I'm here with Martin Duffy. Marty, we've known each other. It's got to be coming on.
Almost 40 years now. Almost 40 years.
You work for Diageo. You've helped create the Independent Spirits Show in Chicago. And, of course, your time as the North American rep for Benedictine is a legend.
Oh, my God.
In the industry.
Many books written about that.
And came out of it. It's amazing. Yeah. But now you're the North American representative for the Glencairn Glass for how many years now?
10 years. I celebrated 10 in August.
Very good. You rep this uniquely appropriate whiskey glass all the way from the Arctic Circle to the Tropic of Cancer. Mm-hmm. It is the official whiskey glass of this podcast. The Willie Becker is the official beer glass, and it is my favorite glass for whiskey work. Tell us about how the Glencairn Glass came about and what makes it the best glass for whiskey, and maybe give us some tips on how best to use it.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people do think that the Glencairn glass has been around forever, kind of like the balloon glass, the brandy sniffer.
Oh, sure.
They just think it's this kind of generic glass, but it's not. What happened? Raymond Davidson, a Scottish fella over there in Glasgow. He started his own crystal company. He was making decanters and bottles for a lot of the Scotch companies.
And when was that?
He started in 1981.
Okay.
And then he realized as he was going into bars and stuff that there was not a glass specifically made for whiskey. Yeah, you had whiskey tumblers, and you had, sometimes you get your whiskey poured into a brandy snifter, but there's no glass specifically for whiskey. So he came up with the idea of creating the Glencairn glass, kind of based off the cognac nosing glass, which is a little smaller and doesn't have a stem, or has a stem. But then after he created it, he thought, who the hell's going to use this? Nobody's going to go for this. So he put it on the shelf for almost 20 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it sat on the shelf for a long, long time till his oldest son, Paul, came into the business and stumbled across it on the shelf. So, Dad, what's this? He goes, oh, that's an idea I had. Nobody's going to go for it. And he says, no, I think it's brilliant. Oh, that's great. Let's see what we can do. So it was Paul that then went out and reached out to a number of the whiskey companies in Scotland they already been working with, and asked a lot of master blenders who do all the nosing. Hey, can you come in, give us your 2 cents on this? I know that, Richard Patterson and Dave Stewart were two, and probably the two who are still around, or at least still working.
Sure.
And supposedly there were other people who gave their 2 cents too, but these 5 were integral into the creation. And lo and behold, I believe it had its coming out party in 2001. And I believe that one of the big things, Whiskey Live over in London, but in the States, it was Whiskey Fest.
Yeah.
New York.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing. And that's actually where I met. It wasn't Whiskey Fest New York, Whiskey Fest Chicago is where I met Raymond and Scott Davidson.
Oh, okay.
And Aileen, which is Scott's wife.
Yeah, I remember when we were doing those fests, that was part of the work, setting out literally like 1,500, 1,800 Glencairn
Yeah,
glasses.
you got back in the day. It was like 24, I think the tops, it was up around 2,500 glasses for a whiskey fest. And from there, it just did become the official glass. However, as you get away from like whiskey fests and industry events, and you go out into the market, you realize a lot of people were calling it the tulip glass. I went into a store once. I was doing
though it literally says the Glencairn Glass right on the base. Yeah.
And I argued with this one guy because he had it labeled tulip glass, $10. I go, this is a Glencairn glass. He goes, I know a tulip glass when I see it. And I go, really? Did you look at the bottom there? It says Glencairn.
Doesn't say tulip there.
Yeah, go ahead, argue with me. Yeah, see what the rest is really history, and it's funny because it just keeps on growing, even 23 years later.
Yeah,
it's still finding new folks. I'm finding distilleries all the time who are buying them. Unfortunately, a lot of them are buying off of Amazon.
Oh,
which would be fine if you're a consumer and you only want a few of them, but that's retail,
right?
And you're buying 200 of them at $14 a piece. You go, no, save your money.
Right. Here's Marty Duffy, guys. Buy direct.
Hello.
So how do you use the Glencairn? How do you get the most out of it?
Well, obviously, a big portion of it is the nosing. And obviously, as you and I, with our nosing classes that we've done in the past, shown that, nosing is a big part of tasting.
Yeah.
There's another competitor glass where the fella has come out and said, it's a nosing glass. It's not a tasting glass. And go, okay, what are you going to do? Pour it into a Glencairn glass if you're done nosing it in yours? I don't think you fully thought that out. So, starting to nose. I always tell folks, when you start to nose in a whiskey Glencairn glass, start at the bottom of the rim and work your way up.
Oh, yes, this is like that ladder thing that you've told me
You
about.
get a lot of the heavier, darker, earthier.
At this point, you're actually holding the glass almost horizontal.
Right,
And
almost
that bulb
45.
lets you do it. Yeah.
Right. And so you're putting your nose down near the bottom of the rim and then working your way slowly up, nosing, and then go
And
side
we're
to
talking
side.
about the space of like an inch and a quarter, so the
Yeah.
slowness is essential. But
Big difference.
I got to be honest, I thought you were so full of crap when you started telling
lot
me
of people
this.
do.
And the first time you do it, I mean, with a decent whiskey,
Yeah.
something that has enough stuff to separate out, it's incredible. The heavier aromas really are at the bottom.
And don't ask me to explain the science because I've never found anyone who could explain it to me. It just is. So it's a great way to really explore a whiskey. To me, the aroma of a whiskey is a big part of the romance.
Oh, yeah.
That and the beautiful amber color, which you can also see through the beautiful crystal glass.
Yeah.
By the way, that's the other thing with the Glencairn glass. It is crystal, but it's not leaded crystal.
Okay.
We use barium for the clarity.
Oh.
So it's not plain glass. It is crystal. But also barium makes it less expensive. We do have a cut crystal, 24% leaded crystal expression, but that's a little pricier. So only get that for your close friends.
Tell me about the other ones. I mean, there's the classic Glencairn. There's the wee Glencairn that you enjoy so much. There's a stemmed version now?
Oh, well, we have the Copita.
Okay.
There is a Glencairn. It looks like Glencairn on a stem. It's not technically a Glencairn glass.
Okay.
And I think, again, that's a little more similar to what cognac distillers will use.
Yeah. And then you have the mixing glass.
The mixer glass.
Yeah.
The mixer. So the mixer glass was created because the Canadians wanted their own glass. Why people want their own glass?
Yeah.
Based on, either their company or it's a glass. It holds whiskey. Just drink it. What's the matter with you? But the Canadians wanted their own, and they wanted it with a wider opening so that you could drop ice.
Wider.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But you could still nose. So if you nose, the mixer glass still has the bowl, and it comes up a bit, not as narrow as the Glencairn glass. And then the lip flares out just a bit, not a lot, just a bit. So it brings up the aroma so you can nose. But then, if you want to add a mixer, as the Scots would say, you want to throw a little ginger ale or soda in there, you can, and ice, which was funny because you talk to like Raymond. Raymond's an old school Scotsman, and he said,
a drop of water, maybe.
Yeah, you bring up ice to him. He goes, "Who's putting ice in the whiskey? What is this?" Because obviously, if anyone's been to Scotland knows it can be kind of chilly.
You don't need ice, right?
Yeah, the last thing they're thinking about is ice. But I thought it was funny because Canada.
Oh yeah, they do.
Not exactly tropical up there.
No, but they want to tell you that all the time. It's actually much warmer than you think.
Oh, I'm sure it is, but I'm thinking it's really Arctic.
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's warmer than I think. It's not warm.
Yeah.
So the mixer glass though became popular among bourbon and Tennessee whiskey drinkers.
Oh.
But we couldn't call it the Canadian glass. So the boys said, why don't we call it the mixer glass? But if you see it in Canada, you will see it. We etch a little maple leaf.
Oh, very nice.
On the base. Yeah, so I actually kind of think that's very cool.
It is cool. I like that. Speaking of which, I mean, I've seen a lot of different engraved Glencairn glasses. Actually, you guys were nice enough to make me a 2-glass set for tasting whiskey. Thank you. A lot of whiskey clubs give it. If people want to get engraved sets of Glencairn glass, what's the process? What do they do?
They usually just contact me. You can. I don't know where you find me other than running into me.
Well,
it's not like I have a website.
Let me know and I'll put it in the podcast.
Well, okay, you can maybe put my email.
Sure.
But the actually, if you contact us online and if you're in the U.S.,
it'll go to you.
Folks in Scotland will send it to me.
Okay.
And then it's really simple. It's how many glasses do you want them branded? If so, just send us a high-res image of your logo. Do you want it personalized too? We can do that.
Wow.
It can be double-sided. if you want. Yeah.
All kinds of options. So as part of your job, repping Glencairn all over North America, you probably travel to more distilleries than anyone I know. I mean, certainly more than me, despite your gracious invites to bring me along. How many distilleries do you think you visit in a year?
I don't know. A year?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think it varies year to year, but
Sure.
I would say, God, that's hard. Because when I travel around the country a lot going to whiskey events, and when I'm in that market,
You do
I
visit.
tag on
right.
some days
Sure.
and go around and try to visit whatever's in the city and then
Yeah, I mean,
surrounding
I have
area.
been on some of those with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. I could do. I've tried to do a lot of the whiskey trails. So I went down to Texas. Tried to do the Texas Distillery Trail. I did about a third of it, and it was still 1,700 miles over 10 days. And I was like, my God.
Yeah, that's not a trail. That's that's a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would guess, let's conservatively say 50.
Okay. I was thinking 50 to 100.
Yeah.
Somewhere, depending on the year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you do visit a new distillery, what are you looking for? Essentially, I'm looking for like advice for the listeners. How do you size up a new distillery when you get there? What are you looking for?
Well, I mean, there's the national North American brand representative for Glencairn, part of me. And then there's just the whiskey.
Right, so you're looking at the merch and whether they carry your glass.
So I go walking in. That's the first thing I zero in on. I go, oh my God, the neat glass. What the hell are you carrying the neat glass for? I accidentally, knocked that shelving over. Oh, that's all broken. Hey, I know a guy who can sell you glasses. But, I'm always intrigued by what they're making, whether it's not only whiskey, but, I've always been a big gin guy. I like my gin. And so you make a good gin. I'm a big fan. So I do like trying and tasting it out. And I'm also very conscious that, I don't want to be a salesman. I don't want to be someone coming in, ruining your day. And you have a visitor center where you're trying to sell. You don't want some guy coming in and trying to sell
you. Yeah.
So I try to go in and see how I can help. So I also love hearing the stories. Almost everybody who started a distillery in the last 15 years came from something
else, right?
There's lawyers, pro golfers, scientists, farmers. Farming families.
There really are a fair number of farmers, aren't there?
Yeah, which is how it all started.
Yeah,
back in the wee days, the old days.
I know at least two chemical engineers who worked in flavor houses.
Yeah, right. And we're here at Journeyman Distillery,
right?
And Bill's family.
We're in Three Oaks, Michigan, in Southwest Michigan.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and only about 3 miles north of the Indiana-Michigan
Is it really
state line.
that close?
Yeah, it's very close.
That.
I was surprised. I thought it was 10.
Yeah.
And we're only 5 miles from Lake Michigan.
Yep.
So we're very close.
Yeah, we really are down in the corner.
Yes, we are. Only about an hour and 15 minutes out of Chicago, folks. So come on up and visit us sometime.
Marty aspires to be the mayor of Three Oaks.
I do.
He has revealed this to me.
I have big plans. Actually, small plans, because I want to keep it small.
That's right.
But
Bill,
Bill's family is from a banking family.
Oh.
So they're bankers / farmers. They had a farm.
Okay.
In fact, a lot of the visitor centers, what do they call that? Refurbished wood?
Repurposed?
Repurposed wood from their old barn, from the family
very
barn.
nice.
Yeah. But see, that kind of stuff, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
I love finding out quirky stuff about a distillery. There's a distillery in Thornton, Illinois. Have you stopped there?
I have not. We've talked about it.
Thornton Distilling, which was a brewery back in Prohibition days, actually owned by an actual gangster who actually did business with Al Capone. And he was one of the few gangsters that actually survived.
And
gangster wars.
Went straight?
He retired.
Legit. I'm sorry, is the word we use, not straight.
He retired.
Okay.
Put it that way. I don't know how legit he became. But he, settled up in Wisconsin.
Okay.
And you go down there, and they actually have a well underneath You walk down these steps. They have it kind of caged off, but they'll take you. They take you down. They bring you down there, and it's like an old, looks like a medieval cellar, except there's a metal pump, and that hits into well water that's in one of the largest limestone deposits in the world. Bigger, more so than Kentucky, is Thornton, Illinois.
How about that?
Yeah. And not nearby is a big old lime pit a limestone pit that they had carved out, and most of those rocks, most of that limestone, went to building buildings in downtown Chicago.
How about that?
See, that kind of history. I love that stuff.
That's beautiful.
But I look for. Anytime I go there, I'm also looking, well, what kind of distribution you got? What are you doing? Because I really am concerned about the little guys. I like little businesses, and I like to support them however I can. I'm no one but a glass salesman.
Right.
But I do know.
You're also a bit of a pollinator.
Yeah, I pollinate a lot.
You do. I mean, you've got a lot of presence on Facebook, and I suspect a lot of people don't realize it's you putting it out there, but you're talking about the industry all the time. You've helped me, and you've been a huge help with selling my books. And you just do it because you like networking.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of people think I make money off this somehow. And I don't. I don't make any money.
Yeah.
I don't ask for money because it doesn't make much sense to try to help people who are trying to make money for themselves.
Yeah.
So, why are you doing that? Hey, could you pay me? No, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
No, I just like seeing people succeed. And so when I go in these places, I look at their spirits. I look at the opportunity for Glencairn.
Cocktail program?
Huh?
Cocktail program?
No. You know what?
Oh, okay.
You mentioned my glorious 18 months as the North American brand ambassador for Benedictine. Kind of turned me off to cocktails a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, every once in a while, I still love my Manhattans.
Okay.
And a nice gin martini. But very rarely, maybe a Negroni, but very rarely,
Anything
too many
else?
Cocktails, they just seem like they're getting sweeter and sweeter.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't stand them anymore.
Yeah, I can see
And God
that.
bless Benedictine. It was a great liqueur, folks. I highly recommend you go out and get some. Don't drink a lot of it, or you're going to have diabetes. Okay?
It's actually in what I've decided is my house drink, the Frisco cocktail.
Yeah,
Bourbon
the Frisco.
And Benedictine. Just a little bit of Benedictine.
Yeah.
All the difference
Well,
in the world.
that was the big problem with being a brand
Exactly,
ambassador.
right.
Every cocktail only had a little bit of Benedictine.
So not the Benedictine part, but talking about craft distilleries, and you like to see people succeed. How are things? I mean, you're out there.
Well, it's getting tough right now.
Yeah. I was just at the ACSA thing, and I was judging for their competition. There was a lot of talk, and I kept hearing a lot of problems with access to market.
Yeah. Well, that's the big problem. 10 years ago, if you came out and said, hey, I have a new whiskey, those distributors be all over you.
Yeah.
Now,
you too?
They'd scoop you up, but that doesn't mean much. This also go back to the whole point that a lot of these distillers are not from the industry, so they don't really quite understand it.
They don't have the connections. They don't have the...
Right. Or the marketing know-how, where they think...
Oh, yeah, you were talking about this last night.
As soon as they think once they make a whiskey, all of a sudden they're Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams. They will come. They will just come. That guy in West Texas I was telling you about, he thinks people are just going to come out there because he's making whiskey.
Miles out in nowhere.
Do you realize a bunch of other distilleries between you and wherever they are, they're going to stop there because it's closer. They think, all right, then they take one more step. They say, I get a distributor, then the distributor will sell it. No. Distributor only takes orders. That's all they're going to do. And a week after you've been with them, you're going to be so small, you're going to fall off their radar.
Yeah, and you're not even new anymore because they have another new brand.
Hey, right. And then a year later, they'll drop you because your stuff isn't moving because you're not selling it.
Yeah.
They have to sell it. And that's the horrible thing is that it is an endless stream of cash you've got to put out. You've got to promote. You've got to hire people to look after your brand in a market or a region. I highly recommend that, folks. Get a proven salesperson, like a distributor rep.
Yes.
And give them a region. And that way they can, hit 4 states. And that's what their job is for a whole year. Split up your time so you're in Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, constantly rotating.
Yeah, I still remember people being, and this is from my craft beer experience, people being horrified that the salesperson was being paid more than the brewer. I'm like, if the salesperson does not do the job, everyone's out of a job.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Yeah.
And a good salesperson is...
And you need a good salesperson.
Yeah.
I don't want bartenders to be mad, but bartenders don't make great brand ambassadors. Because they're not used to cold calling. They're not used to going into a place.
People come to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a big issue with a lot of folks' brand ambassadors. They weren't doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And plus you also have to keep track of what your people are doing out in the market. Since you're paying them, you want to make sure they're not home watching Jeopardy, that they're actually out doing stuff. One distillery I knew, they hired a guy. I told him not to. Because I asked, he was going to handle Chicago, and I asked him, name the five really good whiskey bars in the city. He named a bunch I never heard of, like Joe's Place, the Sneaky Inn, and I go, what is that? What about Delilah's? Do you know Delilah's? It's only Hall of Fame kind of whiskey bar.
Right.
And you go, oh yeah, I never heard of that. And I go, oh boy, no, Bill, you can't hire this guy. And so it turned out the distiller, this guy had been driving Uber prior. And so the distiller checked on Uber, and I guess you can track if someone's been driving all the time. Yeah, he spent the last 10 days Ubering, and he was still collecting a paycheck from the distillery. So listen, when Marty tells you something, listen. I have good instincts.
Yeah. Last question, and this is your chance to dispense. Is there anything the craft distilling industry is not doing that they should be? And I'm not, you can go from like, they really need to have a 92 proof gin all the way up to you need more distilleries in Mississippi. I don't know, whatever you...
Well, actually, there's whole loads of things I could think of. Actually, one, bring down the proof of your whiskeys.
There's
way too many high proof whiskeys out there. And folks, more alcohol doesn't mean more flavor. It just means, really it tastes a lot more alcohol. This is really good.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
You got to bring it down. I think a nice sweet spot is between 90 and 100 proof.
Yes.
That seems great. There are exceptions to that.
Sure.
But basically, you play it safe.
Yeah.
With gin, I totally agree. Yeah, make it 45% alcohol. And don't be scared of juniper. If you're making
another
gin,
thing we talked about. Yeah.
Don't none of this in the 90s, for those of you who were in the industry, when they brought out Sapphire.
Right.
Sapphire.
Right.
They called it the vodka drinker's gin. All right. There's all sorts of things. You can go, little rabbit holes you can go on down that. If you're a vodka drinker, just drink vodka.
Yeah.
So they pulled back the juniper. And so it wasn't all Christmas tree tasting. I like Christmas trees.
Isn't that why you're drinking gin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I taste some gins, and you and I are also talking about a place we went to, a distillery, where we're tasting this distiller's gin, and
it was vodka.
It tastes like vodka.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure, and she was telling us, we really pulled back. We want to make it, the flavors kind of subtle. And I go, not so subtle that you don't notice them. You got to have flavor in the gin.
Yeah.
There's that. The other thing, and I noticed this with craft breweries. You've been to New Glarus.
Yeah.
Spotted Cow. in the Midwest, I don't know how far
It's
this
enormous.
goes up. People love spotted cow.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, at least the last time I was up there, it was only available at the distillery.
Oh, no. It's out there. It's only
Okay.
available in Wisconsin.
What?
It's only available in Wisconsin. Spotted cow.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I meant. Yeah.
No. Oh, I thought you meant only available on the site.
No. Oh, well.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
You can get it in Madison.
I'm
or
sure they
wherever.
would sell that out. But
Yeah.
it became a mecca. People were making the journey to go to
Yeah.
New Glarus. That was great. A lot of what Bill does here at Journeyman in Three Oaks, and now it is new one in Valparaiso. He has 3 large event centers. And this is something I always tell distilleries and even bars.
Mm-hmm.
Bars, if you don't have an event center, event room, you're missing out. It can make or break you. It really can. These, you want to bring events because not only are you making money off these events, and it could be really big money,
Right.
but it's also bringing people in who are then going to want to check out your distillery.
Yeah. People
and buy
have probably
bottles.
never been here before.
And then they take those bottles with them, and now they become your little apostles,
Yeah.
going out into the wasteland and singing your praises. It's such a great thing, and I really can't. Oh, and the other thing on top of that, have events at your distillery that would draw other people. Lou and I are here at Journeyman for the Barrel Aged Beer Festival, which all the money goes to charity. And at the same time, this brings in a bunch of beer drinkers,
Right.
who like barrel age beer, and all the barrels are from Journeyman. All had their whiskey in it previously. Now you have people go, oh my God, I really like this beer. It's been aged in a Journeyman whiskey bar.
Let me try that whiskey.
Try some of that whiskey.
Yeah.
And they go in, try it, boom.
Yeah. Brilliant.
It's just so smart. It's very smart.
Yeah. Anytime you can get that cross fertilization going.
Boom.
Yeah.
And that's if you can find any way to cross promote with anybody, I think that's a great thing to do. Even team up with a charity. Mm-hmm. Because that makes you feel good. You're doing something for a charity, but also the charities bring people, and that's what you want. Especially if you don't think you have the wherewithal to put people in the marketplace. Don't do it then. Don't worry about it.
Bring them to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get people to you and come up with ideas that makes your place a destination place.
Yeah.
It will save you in the long run, except if there's something stupid like COVID.
Yeah.
That really screwed up everybody.
Yes.
There was almost no win. There was very little winning there,
No.
except for the big companies.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they were smart.
Yeah.
At stores like Binny's in Chicago, it was they brought all their stuff up front to the front of these large stores.
So you could just get in and get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, but the little guys couldn't do that.
No.
I always think, you're a little guy. What can you do?
That's it. I mean, for one thing, during COVID in Pennsylvania, the state liquor stores shut down
That's
for 6 weeks. And lots of people suddenly discovered they had a local distillery.
Oh, wow. See,
Because
that's
they
great.
didn't even know it. And I mean, I remember one place, they're like, yeah, these people are coming in like, you knew? I'm like, yeah, well, we've been here 6 years, but it's okay. It's all right. What do you need?
Yeah. Guy Rioris still did boom in business. He had a line going out his door during COVID, I suppose 6 feet apart, I guess.
Yeah.
People can come in and just come up to the counter and order. And so it's...
Yeah. I mean, I remember doing that at who was it? Three Sons in Newtown, Pennsylvania. My wife and I were standing in line. And it was actually kind of, it was nice to get out and actually talk to somebody, even if you were 6 feet apart.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I told you 2001, Bill Welter, and I did our own little distillery tour through Wisconsin, Northern Illinois.
2021.
Yeah, what did I say?
You said 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We went back in time.
You remember that pandemic we had back in 2001? Yeah.
It was more like it was bird flu or something.
Practice run.
But 2021. We drove around, and that was so nice. It was just nice to get out and see people. And also Wisconsin wasn't as closed down as Illinois, so that felt really good. I mean, places were still open.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, wow, why don't we do this? How come it's more contagious in Illinois than up in Wisconsin? What's going on here? You got a lighter version of it up here?
Everybody's different.
Yeah. But anyways, that was really cool.
Yeah.
And in fact, folks, go out and also distillers. Here's another thing for distillers.
Yes.
That I find distillers don't do. They don't visit other distilleries.
Yes. I've told them this so many times.
They don't check out the competition.
Yes.
They don't compare it. They say, why should I? I'm making great stuff here. You don't know if you're making great stuff.
You don't.
Can't compare it
No.
to somebody else's.
No.
You've got to do that. Also, check out what they're doing as far as marketing.
Yep.
Make friends, network. If you go to Islay in Scotland, all those guys.
Yeah, they all know each other.
Now? They all know each other.
Yep.
They get together once a month with their wives, and they all have dinner.
Yeah.
And they're, if somebody needs help, they help each other.
Yep.
Even though they're competing brands.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
one of the best parts of the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, too, go to an ACSA or ADI conference.
Yes.
And network.
Yeah.
Sit in on some of the seminars.
Get involved in lobbying.
Lobbying.
Know
that's
your
right.
rep. Yeah.
And also, don't try to bump heads with your local guild. I've noticed this in almost every state. There's always some guys who think, no, I'm going to go do this. And even though the guild's trying to lobby for this, I'm going to go do this on my own. And then you end up screwing the pooch for everybody, including yourself.
Or getting absolutely nothing done except wasting time and money.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes that's the best outcome.
Yeah, united we stand, divided we fall, people. It's a really good motto to think of in this industry, especially, again, if you're new to it.
Yes.
And you don't know. Learn from those guys who've been at it 10 years.
Why reinvent stuff? Yeah. Always stronger when we work together.
Lou and I are going to start our own school where we just teach people all these valuable lessons.
Wonderful things we've learned.
Yeah. These things we learned for our many years in the industry.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Lewis.
Great to see you.
Fun.
Yeah.
I like being interviewed.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd do it 24 hours a day.
Well, you know. So, go get some beers.
Beer.
All right.
Oh, that's right, beer.
Yeah. That was fun. And good timing, too, because tomorrow, January 10th, is Marty's birthday. Happy birthday, Marty. I mentioned earlier I did some other judging that same week. I was in D.C. for a couple of days at the American Craft Spirits Association competition. I was judging whiskeys, vodkas, and the best of show rounds. But that's not what I'm going to tell you about. No, I'm going to tell you how, when I was leaving D.C. to drive home, I stopped at the Calvert Woodley liquor store to check out their wine selection. Yes, I may have bought some wine out of the reaches of the PLCB's state stores. Oh, no. Hey, if they did a better job, I wouldn't have to, and I sure wish they would. Anyway, the reason I stopped was to check out the selection for our wine club. I think I've mentioned that we have a small wine club here in Millheim, and we get together monthly for a dinner and a focus on a type of wine. I found a bounty of good Italian reds. The store has a well-curated wine section that includes something I immediately gravitate to, wines that are rated over 90 points or better by 4 reliable sources and are also under $20. I scooped some up because 1, I love Italian reds, and 2, we featured Italian reds in the wine club in November. October, however, is always Riesling month because that's how we started. 3 years ago, Kathy and I had amassed a number of really good Rieslings, including a few years of Chateau Saint Michel's Eroica bottling, an exceptionally good Washington State Riesling. We decided to share them with friends and invited some folks over for dinner. It was so much fun, we founded the club that night, and we've been meeting monthly ever since. And to commemorate that first dinner, we always do Rieslings in October. It works well with harvest time, and I just love the wines. We were hosting again this October, and I talked Kathy into making a choucroute garni. This is an Alsatian dish from the heartland of Riesling country, and the shortcut recipe I got from the New York Times food section used a full bottle of Riesling. Now, choucroute is not a dish for the faint of heart, for either the cook or the guest. I have a copy of a parody cookbook, The Devil's Food Dictionary by Barry Foy, where the recipe for choucroute begins, place 3 days' output of meat from the entire nation of France in a large roasting pan. Choucroute garni literally means garnished sauerkraut, and the garnish is a freaking ton of meat. Here's what I did. First, I drained 2 bags of sauerkraut without rinsing it. I sliced half of a large head of cabbage into ribbons about 3/4 inch across, laid them in the bottom of the largest roasting pan we have, covered them with the kraut. Peeled 5 medium onions, halved them, and they were placed cut side down in the kraut. Now the spices. An astonishing 8 bay leaves were tucked under the top layer of kraut, nestled, as the recipe called it. A full tablespoon of whole juniper berries was then scattered evenly across the top, along with plenty of fresh ground black pepper. Then it was time for the meat. I had 2 pounds of boneless country-style pork ribs and another 2 pounds of the Penns Valley Meat Market smoked sausage cut into 5-inch long segments, and 6 big slices of the Meat Market's Canadian bacon. The meat was nestled into the kraut among the onions. Everything got another light dusting of pepper, a sprinkle of kosher salt, and then a full bottle of dry Riesling from Dablon Winery in Baroda, Michigan. Bill Wetter at Journeyman Distilling gave it to me when I was doing the judging with Marty. I wrapped the top of the pan with foil, put the lid on over that, and put it in a 300-degree oven for 2 hours. I tested the ribs at 2 hours by plunging a table fork into the thickest one. It didn't slide out easily, so I put it back in for another 30 minutes. That did the trick, and I turned the oven up to 450, took the foil off the pan, and put it back in to brown up for another 30 minutes. The club members arrived, and we opened some bottles to taste. We munched on a warmed camembert with mushrooms and pecans, some honey pretzels, a delicious bowl of meatballs, and potato puff canapes, and some more wine. When it was time for dinner, we put a large cutting board in the center of the table, and I brought the pan of choucroute in. It was pretty impressive, a 24-inch roaster full of meat, onions, and sauerkraut. We dug in. I do regret deeply that I have no pictures of this. I plead guilty to living in the moment. I will say this. The meat was tasty and tender. The kraut was mild and delicious. The onions were sweet and cooked through. The Riesling had completely given up its soul to the meal and survived only as a vanishingly light sweetness, not overbearing in the least. We tore into it. Several people had seconds. Kathy said it was some of the best sauerkraut she'd ever had. And that was an odd thing. You remember the shredded cabbage? I honestly couldn't tell what was kraut and what was cabbage. It had all become delicious. And as the temperature dropped towards the 30s outside, it was all quite seasonal. The recipe can be had at the New York Times cooking site named Shortcut Choucroute by Mark Bittman. I doubled it. It calls for pork shoulder. I substituted the boneless ribs, and really you could use almost any cut of pork. I've seen recipes that use high-end hot dogs as well. You can add apples, carrots, turnips, potatoes, really any taste-appropriate vegetable. It's very flexible. You don't even have to use Riesling. You can use apple cider, a non-hoppy beer like Oktoberfest or Kolsch, or a combination. But don't be afraid of it. This was massively simple. Might make it again just for fun. But not for a while. We had leftover choucroute for several dinners. Hey, I've got a bunch of personal and family stuff coming up, like my daughter Nora's birthday. She asked for, and we'll be getting a bunch of old cookbooks. A friend's retirement party, all of Kathy's brothers coming to visit for a weekend, my own birthday, and more What's Brewing episodes. Then the last weekend of February, I'm going to be the honorary German beer ambassador at the Beer Fest in Philadelphia at the German Society of Pennsylvania headquarters. If you've never been to the Beer Fest, it's worth a trip to Philly. 3 floors and 2 buildings of German and German-style beers, music, stein holding, roller derby servers, outdoor fire pits, and lots of German food. Wurst, kraut, pretzels, desserts, schnitzels. Yum! That's all on February 22nd. Get the details and buy tickets at germansociety.org/beerfest. That's BIERFEST. It's always been a good time. The next day, February 23rd, I'll be hustling back here to the Smack Dab Center for Elk Creek Cafe's Day of Delicious Darkness, our little brew pub's annual celebration of dark beers. It's one of the best organized little beer events I've ever seen, and people line up on Main Street to get in. Come to Millheim, join us. First come, first served, no tickets. Official time isn't set yet, but last year's was at 1 o'clock. I'll let you know when I have the official details, and I hope to see you there. That's the show. My thanks to Marty Duffy for the interview, and my further thanks to him for being a good friend and a booster of my writing for a long time. He is, as we say, a pollinator, and has helped a lot of people in the industry succeed, just because when we all do well, we all do better. As always, you can find pictures for this episode on Instagram at Stag Podcast and on Facebook at Seen Through a Glass. If you're listening to the show on the radio at WSOV, there are over 40 more episodes to enjoy, including a Millheim episode and a Nittany Valley episode at seenthroughaglass.podbean.com. That's PODBEAN.com. Or you can find us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to toss a bit in my hat to keep the show going, I have a coffee button on my Instagram link tree, that's at Stag Podcast, and at the Facebook page. It's an easy way to drop me a few bucks online to help keep this going. Thank you. Have you ever thought about zippers? You know, there were several precursors to the modern zipper made in Chicago and Hoboken, but the first production zipper factory in the world, the Hookless Fastener Company, opened in Meadville, Pennsylvania, in Crawford County in 1913. It subsequently became the Talon Company and still makes zippers, though largely in Asia. Now, what's coming up with the podcast? Well, I do have that interview with Bill Welder from Journeyman, and it's a good one, but I'd like to do something in Pennsylvania if I can get a quick interview done. I talked to the folks at Bald Birds Brewing in Jersey Shore yesterday. Might be able to get an interview there in time for that episode. We'll see. Until then, thanks for listening. This is Lou Bryson, back with Seen Through a Glass from the smack dab center of the Keystone State.